What is up, my YouTube family? Welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time here, then it's just welcome to my channel. Now, welcome back. Go ahead and hit the subscribe button because you will not be disappointed, you guys. I felt like we were due for a cult, and I don't do too many cults just because it takes so much research. Like, the research is extensive. It takes a really long time to do it, which is why y'all didn't get this video last week. I'm not gonna get it in the second half of this coming week. Like they really do a lot. It's always a whole lot of ground to cover, and this is a very interesting one. I had not heard of them before, and I don't even remember how I came across this story, but I'm not going to waste too much time in the beginning talking because I don't know how long this video is about to be. So without further ado, let's just get right into today's story, which is about Terri Hoffman and the Black Lords. Now, Miss Terri Hoffman was born on March 21st of 1938. So, of course, Miss Thing is an Aries. Okay, and I'm not too much surprised. But I'm not going to give y'all too much because we are within y'all season. Granted, we'll be in Taurus season by the time you're seeing this. Shout out to all the Tauruses. Y'all know this is my second favorite sign. And my own is my first, of course. Terry's family was pretty much poor. They did not have a lot of money at all. I mean, they barely had enough money to, afford to take care of a child. Now, despite them not having a whole lot of money or enough money to really just maintain their own household, even before a child, Terry's mother does her best. Now, unfortunately, though, she does not have much help from her husband and Terry's father, who much preferred to spend his days drinking himself into a little slumber. Now, due to her family's financial struggles, Terri does not have the newest or the best, the cutest, most fashionable clothes or shoes, right? Most of her wardrobe consists of ill-fitting, unkept, secondhand pieces that had pretty much already been worn down to their death by someone else. And because of her lack of fashions, not many of the other children are very quick to befriend little Terri. So she's oftentimes very lonely. Not having many friends or really any friends at all, she spends a lot of her free time alone, keeping to herself and avoiding her peers to kind of, minimize the ridicule that she had to endure for their little entertainment. Y'all know what kids give. Even back in the 1940s, they delighted in the ridicule of the less fortunate children. Terri also opts to spend a lot of her time alone and away from her home because she wanted to avoid the dysfunction of her family dynamic as much as possible. Now, according to Terri, by the time she had got up to this age where she is attending school and being ostracized by her little peers, she was already prepared for things like this because she said that at just age 4, she had been relaxing underneath a little shade tree minding her 4-year-old business when 3 men appeared out of nowhere. They're all dressed in these long robes and they tell her that she is gifted and unlike anyone else, and that she possesses the power and ability to be literally anything in this world that she wanted to be if she wanted it bad enough. She had also been advised by these men that anytime she encounters any trouble in life, she should always think about God and how she is one of his chosen children. So there would be no need for her to get revenge or do any of the things because he will take care of them accordingly. Now, unfortunately for little Terri, those troubling times will come sooner than later. Her mother first gives birth to her younger sister. Terri had been so excited about being a big sister and having a little built-in friend because more often than not, whoever this little kid was, she could kind of, force a relationship. She wouldn't be lonely anymore. And it was also very likely that had things gotten out of hand, on the playground, she'd have a little backup. But the sister that she had spent months anticipating is stillborn. And as if that is not traumatic enough for little Terri, her mother loses a battle with tuberculosis shortly after. And this, of course, leaves her to be raised solely by her father, who we know is not the most fit of parents. Now, in both of these traumatic events, Terri leans on the memory and the message of these 3 men and the words that they had given to her. She takes their advice using God and the fact that she is one of his chosen children as a way to cope and remain encouraged that despite what goes on and what trouble she encounters, she will always, make it out okay. She will always be okay in the end. And honey, her little belief in this was really put to the test because not long after losing her mother, things just pretty much go from bad to worse. When her father, either unable or unwilling to take care of Terri by himself, decides to send 9-year-old Terri away to a Lutheran orphanage to be properly cared for until she could be placed with a good family. Now, once she reaches this orphanage, her faith and her infatuation with religion, it intensifies. She also begins having more of these religious visions, like the one when she was just a little 4-year-old girl sitting underneath the tree. And now that she is a little bit older, they are a lot more vivid and are happening a lot more frequently. The children at the orphanage find Terri to be a little strange, and so they kind of shy away from her. She was not judged for not having much because they didn't have much. It was her personality that threw them off. And so none of them really showed an interest in getting to know her. By now, Terri had become accustomed to this kind of treatment from kids around her age. She just figured they just did not understand her, which for her was fine. She really didn't care much about that, especially considering the fact that she had begun formulating a relationship with one of the caretakers at the orphanage, and she had begun to learn about things that she finds far more interesting than making friends. Reincarnation was one of the first subjects that she had been introduced to for the first time once she reached the orphanage. She finds the idea that we have infinite lives and we live as these different beings and species just completely fascinating. She would spend her days in the orphanage daydreaming about what she may have been in her previous lives, how the one that she is currently living is going to turn out, and also where she be going after this. Like, what would the next stop be? Am I going to be a turtle? What would she like it to be if she had a choice in the matter? She also learns of a 16th century Roman Catholic saint by the name of Saint Teresa, who claimed to have had visions of both Mary and Jesus, and had also claimed to have visited heaven, like had been there on a little mini vacation or a little detour. And she was also very well known for practicing meditative prayer, which Terri also finds to be very, very interesting. 2 years into her stay there at the orphanage, Terri is finally adopted by a couple from Dallas who had unfortunately just lost their natural-born daughter to tuberculosis. And they were kind of looking to fill the void that they felt from losing their own child. And with all the children out here who are in need of a family, they figured, why not do so by giving one of these loving children a home? That child being little Terri. Now, once the adoption is finalized, they change Terri's middle and last name, take her home. And she doesn't really have a difficult time adjusting to her new life. Settling into her new reality is a fairly easy transition for her, but she does over time become less of a religious fanatic. Although her faith is still very much intact and she does not abandon her beliefs about her being the chosen one or forget the message that, the 3 wise men had given her underneath the tree. She just wasn't as obsessive over it as she had previously been. And that was partly due to the fact that for the first time in her life, she is in a very loving, stable environment. Terri spends the next 3 years just getting used to her new life, right? And then at age 14, she meets a young man who is 18 by the name of John Wilder. And the two of them begin dating shortly after they meet. Now, her parents are not in support of this union at all, and for multiple reasons. Her mother especially tries to steer her away from John, not only because of the age difference, well, because she saw John as a little thug, okay? According to her, he was not a good influence on her daughter whatsoever. He had dropped out of high school, was a little rough around the edges, and she just did not want this for her child. She thought that Terri deserved better. The more Mrs. Benson expresses her disdain for John and he and Terri's little relationship, the more Terri seemed to be interested in John. Like it was having a reverse effect. And John really tried to convince the Bensons that they were wrong about him. Like, yeah, even though he dropped out of school, he wasn't out here in these streets getting into trouble. He had got him a nice little job working as a truck driver, making 85 cents. an hour, which I guess in that time was, a pretty significant coin. But they didn't care about any of that, okay? They did not want him with their daughter. And the more they pressed the issue, the more smothered Terri herself began to feel. And just a few weeks after her 15th birthday, she decides to take John up on this promise that he had always made her, which was that one day the two of them would run away together, get married, and he would take care of her with his nice little truck driving job. She and John feel very much in love with each other, and they have a plan for them to be able to be together forever and in peace without the interference of her family. The two of them run off to Durant, Oklahoma to get married, which was the closest place that she could get married at her age without having adult consent at the time. Now, they don't plan on living there because, his little job that he's going to support them with is back in Dallas. So after they tie the knot and get their little license printed out for proof, they return to Dallas, break the news to her parents, and then begin their little life together as a husband and wife. Now, Terri drops out of school to become a full-time housewife, and 18 months later, after they get married, the two of them welcome their first child, which is a little girl that they named Kathy. 4 years after that, they welcome their second child, which is a son, and then another daughter shortly thereafter. And Terri spends her days tending to her children, taking care of the household, being a good, loving, supporting wife, as well as tending to a garden of hers. But as the years go by, Terri becomes a little bored with her repetitive little lifestyle and finds herself yearning to now be more than just a housewife and a mother. She formulates this little group of like-minded individuals, which at this time basically consisted of other housewives. They would meet up, meditate together, and have these in-depth conversations about the origin and the structure of the universe, humanity, and the reason and purpose of us all being here. And around this time, she also develops this very odd infatuation with hypnosis. She spends countless hours a day reading about it endlessly, okay? Anything that she could find on the subject, she would be willing to read cover to cover. And when that was no longer enough, my girl found her little class that she could go to not only learn more about it, but to also be trained to perform hypnosis herself. Not long after this, the dynamic of her group of fellow housewives who just shared, common interests slowly begins to shift. And the group members begin to sort of look at Terri as a leader. They respect her, they admire her, they think she's just so smart and so charming. And most of all, they listen to her because they trust her. Her little shift into this role as their leader, it was an easy little transition for her because, all her life she believed that she was this chosen child of God. And so, rightfully so, I would be the leader. She was in charge of the girls. Now, she and John give up their farm life to move into a modest little 3-bedroom house right outside of Dallas. And at this point, their marriage begins to fall apart. John had noticed his wife's interest had begun to shift, but he didn't really care about it because he did not think that this would really impact their marriage at all. He had also noticed that her little devout circle of friends had begun to inflate Miss Girl's little ego. And he didn't really mind that either, but what he did not like was the fact that whatever this was that she was building with them had begun to take precedence over every other aspect of her life, including her marriage to him, her being a mother to their children, the garden is falling apart in the backyard. It's just a lot going on that she is not paying attention to because her number one priority is her little friend group. And the way that they look up to her and listen to her and pretty much just hang on to her every word really inspires her to expand her group beyond just this little circle of friends. She is granted the perfect opportunity to do so when she is given the chance to teach a free class on spirituality out of Southern Methodist University. And her class quickly becomes very popular. She would lecture hundreds of students on the topics of reincarnation, meditation, the theory of karma, and also astral travel, which is like, from my understanding, when you can leave your body and see your body, see yourself, and travel outside of. Let me not do too much, like I know a whole lot about it, but I do know it's like an outer body experience that you can control, if I'm not mistaken. Now, with the growing popularity of her class, she too gains a lot of notoriety herself because a lot of people were drawn to her personality. They found her to be charming, charismatic, nice, kind, trustworthy, just all of the things. Terri was quickly becoming that girl, okay? Everybody wanted to be around her, be in her presence, and get a little bit of her time. And it's not just her personality that draws the people in. It's also her gifts because, according to her, let her tell it, she has the ability to see someone's past lives, like all of them, in detail. She's also able to see their present life as well as their future lives to come. And in addition to that, she is spiritually connected to the divine, the supreme being, and can communicate with those who have crossed over already. These gifts are what catch the attention of a lot of the people who were drawn to her. Not everybody believed that she possessed these powers and gifts and all of that, but the people who believed her, like, they didn't even question it. She also claims to possess healing powers that could heal any ailment, any sickness, anything at all, along with the ability to protect her students from harm. And she would have these demonstrations where she would prove her talents to her students. Now, one evening, and one example of this, she tells a young man who is one of her students that his girlfriend is going to be involved in a fatal accident, a fatal car accident, and only an emergency meditation session could save her. Him believing her and, of course, wanting to save his girlfriend if he could do anything that could prevent this horrible event from happening, he agrees to the meditation session, which Terri conducts. And then afterward, the girlfriend, she lives. No such accident occurs. Not because there never was an accident to begin with, but because they had their meditation session. And Terri blocked it because Terri got the power. There was also an instance where her young son, Kenneth, dislocates his thumb. And she refuses to take him to get any kind of medical treatment because, according to her, she has the healing power herself. Now, she just pushed the little socket back in place, but the students of hers were very much in awe by her power and her healing abilities. And so they just, again, just ate that up as proof of power. Now, just as quickly as her little star power is beginning to rise amongst her students, her home life begins falling apart. Her husband, John, is not convinced of any of the things, okay? None of them, actually. And at first, he didn't mind this. It gave his wife something to do. She said she was tired of being a housewife. It kept her busy. It was a passion project, or so he thought. And so he did not mind any of the things that were going on. But when he noticed that a lot of her little following were young college students, some of them were students who had issues with addiction and things like that, he kind of felt like Terri was preying on them and their vulnerability, and he didn't really like that. But Terri insists that he has it all confused. She is not purposely targeting any demographic or any type of person. She is not taking advantage of them in any kind of way. Everything that she is saying to them, she also believes herself, and it's not what he is making it out to be. Now, he refused to just go along with her teachings and the things that she has going on. He really wanted nothing to do with it at all. He also found it really weird the way that these people, these students of hers, would follow after her like puppies and hang on to her every word, despite how irrational some of the things she would say sounded to him. And we'll get to some of them things because it's not even the stuff that I previously mentioned. And for him, all of this stuff was strange enough, bars. But when Terri begins accepting payments for her gifts, charging for private lessons to teach people, some of the things that she claimed she had acquired naturally as a gift, also charging for consultations and really pushing her students to donate to her to help fund her work, John began to give this an even bigger side eye, especially considering the fact that a lot of her students were real students, like college students who were struggling. And so they didn't have a whole lot of money to give. But for her, she didn't mind that because she accepted jewelry, she accepted anything of value that they could gift her, whether they had to steal it from their little mamas or work hard at McDonald's to be able to afford it. However they got their little hands on it, she didn't mind, just as long as she eventually got her little hands on it. Now this becomes something else that the couple would oftentimes argue about. And the thing is, if you ask Terri, it wasn't her morality and whether or not this was right or wrong that John has an issue with. It's the fact that she is now bringing in more money than he is. And he cannot come to terms with that and be okay with it. He was jealous of the fact that his wife was doing better than him financially. And John, however, maintains that no, that is not, like, that's not it, girl. Even still, he attempts to make the marriage to his wife work. He was committed to being there for her and them riding this thing called life out to the end, right? But the final straw for him comes when she starts getting a little too close for comfort to one of her students, a young man by the name of Glenn. Now, Glenn Cooley was one of the students who had sought Terry's help initially because he wanted to overcome an addiction of his. And Glenn was described as a very troubled but gentle young man. Like, he may have gotten into some trouble, but he was overall a nice guy. And he really admired Terri. He actually would insist on sitting directly next to her during the meditation sessions that she would host. And he wasn't just trying to sit next to Miss Terri. He would hold her hands during said meditation. And the relationship between Terri and Glenn ultimately serves as a catalyst for the ending of Terri and John's marriage. John, at this point, realizing that this inappropriate relationship was going on and Terry's reluctance to put an end to it or set some boundaries with Glenn, it was just too much. That was it. That was the last straw for John. And he goes and files for divorce, which he does so just 3 days after Christmas. Child, he said he was not taking Terri into the new year with him. Not again. Terri had always insisted that there was nothing going on with her and Glenn, that John was jealous for no reason. He had no reason to worry. Child, John was not trying to hear that, nor did he believe it. So he goes forward and through with the divorce. And Terri does not respond well. She has a whole mental breakdown that results in her having to be Baker acted. It was really bad for her, but John had made up his mind and he was not going to change it. She gets released. The divorce gets finalized. Now, in the divorce settlement, John is awarded the 1968 Mustang, which is only 2 years old at the time because it's 1970 we're talking about. He also is awarded custody of their youngest 2 children, the family home, along with all of its contents, an array of weapons that they own together. He is also awarded their shared bank accounts. They become just his bank accounts. Terri walks away with pretty much nothing, just her personal belongings and custody of their oldest son, Kenneth. Within months, the now 33-year-old Terri marries 20-year-old Glenn Cooley. It's always the ones they told you don't worry about. Them the ones that you should have been worrying about all along. And Glenn had actually just turned 20. The two of them move in together as soon as they get married. She encourages him to drop out of class at North Texas State. And by this time, she was starting up a jewelry business of her own. So it was her plan to employ her new husband through her company. And she wants him to help run it. Terri did not at all question or doubt the success of her business because she had a plan. And that plan for success is to encourage her following, which is now formally known as Conscious Development, to make very generous donations to her business, which she would refer to as offerings. And her followers are quick to oblige. They don't give any kind of pushback, hesitation, ask no questions. Their support / funds help her to fund her next business venture. She began selling books and tapes of her lectures, which helps her to gain even more popularity. And before you know it, Conscious Development consists of hundreds of members who view and treat Terri as this Christ-like figure. These people would prayed to her in their times of distress. They would come to her when they need counsel, when they need advice on anything. They would come to her to see what their future held. They would come to her and repent. And in the meantime, when they didn't need anything from her, they still just wanted to be around her and in her presence. Some of whom actually follow her around with the hopes of witnessing a miracle. Like, they really believed in Terri. They really did. Now, Glenn's family did not really support their marriage, but he was a grown man, and so there was nothing they really could do about it. And it's not the age gap that got them. It was the simple fact that they found Terri to be very strange. And that's all it was at first. However, as the months progressed, Glenn's mother begins to notice how domineering and controlling Terri is and how strained their relationship is becoming because of that. And Terri was extremely controlling about everywhere that Glenn went. She wanted Glenn by her side literally 24/7, okay? Rarely was he allowed to go visit his family without Terri being in attendance as well. She was always there, breathing down his neck, listening to every conversation that he was having. And the few times that he did go visit his mother without Terri, Terri would call his phone over and over like an obsessed maniac. She would begin by asking, what's going on, just saying she was checking in with him and she missed him. That would eventually progress to her asking how much longer he planned to be there. And then, of course, that turned into, you need to be coming home right now, sir. It's been long enough. It's been a whole hour and a half. Come home. There were even instances where she had told him to come home, and she ended up showing up at his mother's house in the driveway before he left. Like, she would sit in the driveway, blaring the horn, yelling for him to come outside and leave with her. 5 years into their marriage, Glenn confides in his mother and tells her that he is at the point where he is ready to be done. Like, he is over this whole relationship. He wants to divorce her and to go on about his life. And he, of course, no longer desires to be a part of this conscious development group. It had become apparent to him over the years that Terri is far removed from the image and persona that she portrays and that most people see her as. She ain't like Jesus at all, actually. And he's also gotten to the point where he's begun to see conscious development for what it really is, child. And that's just a cult. Now, whether or not he and Terri discussed dissolving their marriage is unclear, but Terri is the one that actually files for the divorce. And days after she files, on January 27th of 1977, Glenn files a waiver for speedy processing so that the process could go a little quicker. Like Kim slid in and did Kanye. He did not want to drag this out. He wanted it to be over and done ASAP. An additional 5 days go by, and Glenn is found deceased in a cabin owned by his parents. It is actually Terri and a couple other members of conscious development that make the discovery. When the police come out and investigate, they find 2 pills laying underneath Glenn, and a toxicology report reveals that there were multiple substances in his system. Now, given his troubled past, his history with substance abuse, and his depression, this being an intentional thing was a very plausible explanation for authorities. But his family, they did not share the same sentiment. They did not believe that he had done this to himself whatsoever. Everything that he was unhappy with in his life, he was actively working to change. And it was really just the marriage to Terri and his involvement with conscious development. So in their mind, it just does not make sense. The timeline does not add up. The math ain't math. And like, why would he do this now after he had gotten free of them? And if that is not suspicious enough, the very next day after Terri discovers him, she also finds a note in her safe that had apparently been left there the day before by Glenn. And the note reads, "I, Glenn Cooley, give Terri Cooley all of my property, both personal and real. This includes 2 boats, a 1972 Buick Limited, all jewelry and equipment for its making, all furnishings for the house on Dunhaven Road, and all cash." Now, he had actually given her clear title to the house just 2 weeks prior. I asked that this last will of mine not be contested by anyone in any way for any reason. Last but not least, I give all my love to all my family and friends. As an explanation for all of this, I can't really say what it is because of, But I can say what it is not because of. It is not because of divorce with Terri, past drug experiences, inability to cope, etc. What it is, I myself know, but don't have the words for. Now, what is also very suspicious is Terri's behavior at the funeral, because at his funeral, she would cry hysterically, like really dramatic, really loud, and she would act as though she's trying to speak through these tears and this hysterical cry of hers. But then she would pause and look over at his mother, like glancing at his mother to see, I guess, a reaction, probably to see if she was, if she appeared to be believing it. So that was really weird for everybody. Maybe the way my family would have tossed her out with a black eye. Girl. Now, Terri has a meeting with Conscious Development, and she has a little trick up her sleeve. She declares to her following that Glenn's untimely demise is proof that there are evil, powerful forces working against them. Forces that she had not previously told them about, but she had known about all along. And now that they were attacking the crew, she wanted to bring them in the loop and make them aware. And these evil forces she referred to as the Black Lords. Now, she warns them that the Black Lords have the power to poison their blood, giving them different ailments, different diseases. And to protect themselves, they must practice what she calls bloodletting, which was basically them draining blood from themselves to remove the poison. Now, for a lot of her following, this was a bit much. Like, this is the point where they were like, all right, sis, yeah, I'm about to head out. A lot of them were not willing to sit up here and let some of their little good old blood just go down the drain like that. They weren't here for that at all. And so they decided to part ways with Conscious Development, and she let them. She didn't give any kind of pushback. Now, those that decided to stay and continue and go forward with Conscious Development, they 100% believe her and in the existence of these entities. They feared the Black Lords more than anything in the world, and they clung to Terri, believing that she was the only someone with the knowledge and power to protect them from the Black Lords. Now, among those that remain loyal to Terri is a woman by the name of Sandy. Sandy had not been involved with the group for a long time, but within that short time, she has solidified herself as one that could be trusted and is completely devoted to Terri. At the time that she had joined the group, she had a husband and a daughter who we'll call D for the sake of me not knowing how to pronounce this young lady's name and not wanting to butcher it. But she had since left her husband, who she claimed was blocking her spiritual development by not being 100% in support of her joining Conscious Development. He didn't believe in Terri or any of the things Terri was teaching about, okay? He just thought it was a bunch of BS. And Sandy ultimately chooses Terri and Conscious Development over her marriage. Now, her involvement with Terri and not Christian. Why do I want to call them Christian Development so bad?
She's not a Christian! She's tampering in dark-sided stuff!
Now, her involvement with Conscious Development and Terri and all of her teachings, and how quickly she'd fallen into all of this and decided to just believe it and dedicate her life to it, it really left her husband questioning her mental state.
She is dark-sided too!
On one hand, he did not want to allow her to gain custody of their 7-year-old daughter, D. But at the same time, with how Terri had convinced Sandy that this is just one of many lives, it's not really significant, like passing away and going on to your next life really is just not that big of a deal at all. She would basically just lay down in this earth, girl, and then come back as like a butterfly or something. She had gotten to a point where she was no longer afraid to perish, girl, and she wasn't afraid for them to perish either. Knowing that, he really believed that had he fought for custody of their daughter, she probably would have opted to send their daughter right on to her next life, if you get what I'm saying, just to avoid him getting custody of her. He didn't want that to happen. He really didn't put it past her. He really thought she was very much capable of doing something like that and not thinking twice about it or thinking it's a big deal. So he allows her to keep their daughter. But of course, he keeps a very close relationship with little D. Terri rewards Sandy's devotion and sacrifices by making her treasurer, and the two become extremely close, like sisters.
Is dark-sided.
And by the time little D reaches 14 years of age, she is completely embarrassed by her mother's infatuation over this cult. Like, she was very ashamed that her mother was so into all of these things. Like, she was embarrassed of her, and she had no interest in joining conscious development herself. And she made this very clear to Sandy, and Sandy hated to hear this. She really wanted her daughter to share her beliefs and join them. With how close Terri and Sandy are at this point, Sandy, of course, is always very open and honest and venting to Terri about her desires for Dee to join them and how Dee is just not wanting anything to do with them despite her urging. And so Terri plants the seed in Sandy's head that Dee might be possessed by the Black Lords, and that it may be best for Sandy to distance herself from her daughter, which she does not question. She begins to do. While this really, really upset Dee, she still wasn't willing to join conscious development. Like, she just was hell-bent on not being a part of the group. For months, Sandy refuses to attend any of these basketball games. She refuses to take her shopping, spend any kind of quality time with her, do any extracurricular activities with her. She just really pulled away from her daughter, and no matter how much she saw that this affected Dee, she did not change. She was convinced that this had to be done, and that Dee, unfortunately, was quite possibly possessed by these Black Lords. And in a strange turn of events, one day, Sandy randomly invites Dee to take a trip with her and her fiance that she was now dating. He was also a member of Conscious Development, to Hawaii. By now, Dee misses her mother so much that she jumps at the opportunities. It's Hawaii as well, but not only that, she really missed having fun with her mother. And so she does not hesitate at all to go on this trip with them. So on February 25th of 1979, Sandy and her daughter go out to a lagoon with an inflatable raft. The fiance is there as well, but he has no intention of going out into the water. He stays at the shore. Now, this particular lagoon was away from all other beaches. It's not really a popular site for swimming, more so like catching crabs and things like that. And the waters were described as being really calm, typically. However, unfortunately, once they get out on the raft about 400 feet away from the shore, the waves become very rough and vicious, and one of them comes in and knocks them both off the raft. A second wave comes in and pushes them further apart, and Sandy struggles to find her daughter, but she has no luck in doing so. Now, the waters then calm back down, but there is no Dee in sight anywhere. The fiance calls the fire department, and they go out, retrieve Sandy and the raft from the water. But unfortunately, although they quickly find Dee as well, she is not as lucky as Sandy and had not survived the ordeal. Now, Sandy's ex-husband and Dee's father is made aware of this accident, and he quickly boards a flight to Hawaii. He goes out there ASAP, but before he can even get to Hawaii, he is contacted by a member of Conscious Development because he apparently needed to be made aware of a handwritten document made by his daughter and witnessed by two members of Conscious Development outlining her last will and testament. It stated who would receive all of her belongings as well as her $125,000 trust fund should anything happen to her. And everything, the money, all of her personal belongings are all left to none other than Terri, claiming that Terri had been like a second mother to her, and so she wanted to leave all of these things to her for that reason. Girl, you got a whole first mother. Why wouldn't you leave it to Sandy? But I digress. Now, Dee's father was already questioning from the moment he found out about this, whether or not it was an accident. He was already unsold on the story that they had told him. But for him, this validated his suspicions. He knew Sandy was capable of doing something like this. He definitely believed that this was her doing. He just needed a way to prove it. Now, he did recognize the handwriting as his daughter's handwriting, but even still, he believed that she was forced to write that letter and that this wasn't something that she just came up with on her own. Luckily, though, as for the document itself, it was not legally valid due to her age. She was only 14, so they did not uphold these last will and testaments of hers in court. So Terri didn't inherit anything. Sandy returns from Hawaii, and now she and Terri are closer than ever. They are damn near inseparable, like always together, always talking on the phone like this, okay? Sandy even breaks off her engagement so she could be more readily available to Terri, who unfortunately just a couple months after the Hawaii incident loses a child of her own when her son Kenneth falls from the top of a building. Kenneth was 22 at the time, and he was the one son that she had custody of after the divorce with her husband. Kenneth had also had an insurance policy where he made Terri the sole beneficiary as well, so that was a little suspicious. Nevertheless, she plays the role of a grieving mother, and Sandy is right there by her side to console her. Granted, they shared, the same loss. After they had returned from Hawaii and Terri was unable to collect on Dee's trust fund, she convinced Sandy that it is best that they don't make the same mistake twice since Dee's will was unable to be upheld. They needed to go ahead and make sure that if anything happens to Sandy, there is an ironclad will and testament that will be able to be upheld and not shot down in a court of law. Sandy takes out a $300,000 life insurance policy on herself, making Terri the sole beneficiary. And in the following months, she also signs over her home to Terri, gifts Terri her valuable artwork and all of her good jewelry, along with a handwritten letter that says that she wishes for all of her belongings to be used either directly or indirectly for the benefit of conscious development upon her demise. In September of 1981, just 3 months after establishing her life insurance policy and her will, Sandy Cleaver drives her station wagon off of the edge of a mountain, unaliving herself and her 77-year-old housekeeper that had also been in the car with her. And oddly and strangely, the housekeeper had just updated her will as well, naming Terri the sole beneficiary of everything that she owns that is of value just a couple of weeks before. Sandy's brother contests the will, citing fraud and undue influence, claiming that she was not in her right mind and that Terri had unlawfully coerced her into writing up this will. Now, he does win in court. This turns out in his favor, and Terri is unable to collect. And not only that, the court case brings a lot of unfavorable attention to Miss Terri and her organization, but not enough to put an end to any of it. She kept going. She just was a little embarrassed, child, just a little ashamed. However, she is not too ashamed because she becomes even more crafty in her works. Now, she views both instances where she has failed to collect, both for Dee and Sandy, as losses, as monetary losses. And so she wants to make up for them as soon as possible. And her plan to do so is to convince certain members of her following that they have been attacked by the Black Lords and are now suffering from terminal illnesses, one of which being a woman by the name of Robin. Now, Robin had told her ex-husband that she had found out that her physical body was working against her and that she had terminal viral hepatitis. Initially, he is empathetic, he is feeling bad for her, he is offering her support, but when he finds out that it is Terri that has made this diagnosis and not an actual medical professional, he urges her to go see a doctor instead. Just don't believe that. Go see a doctor. Get a second opinion, if you will. Just be sure. Don't just take it and run with it. But unfortunately, Robin does not take the advice of her ex-husband. And just 2 days after they have this conversation, Robin takes a .38 caliber revolver and unalives herself. A blood test is performed after the fact because the ex-husband wanted to know if she was in fact sick, and it came back completely negative. There were no diseases at all detected in her blood work. She was actually perfectly healthy. Roughly 7 months later, Mary Levinson, a very devoted member of Conscious Development, is found unresponsive in her home due to an apparent or what looks to be an OD. Now, upon further investigation, it is discovered that $125,000 was recently removed from her account, and they are unable to find out where that money could be. Like, it is just completely unaccounted for. And she had recently, very recently, 2 weeks prior recently, updated her insurance policy, making the sole beneficiary her ex-boyfriend, who was a member of Conscious Development and a really, really close friend of Terri's. And speaking of Terri, Miss Girl here was now on her 4th husband, Mr. Don Hoffman. Now let me tell you how messy this is. Don Hoffman had originally joined Conscious Development with his wife after they had lost their 3-year-old in a tragic accident. And they had both become really close to Terri, but he had become a little bit closer than his wife, which ultimately led him to divorce her and marry Terri. And then his wife, of course, she left the group after that. She just decided, you know what, I'm not going to stick around for this, okay? No. And after marrying Terri, he quits his job as an engineer to completely devote his life to Conscious Development. You know, she get her a man. That's what she do. She got her a man, and she made him quit what he was doing and devote his life to her and her work. Terri was a cold, cold girl. He devoted his little life to CD without hesitation, but unfortunately for him, that is also where would he end? As soon as he falls out of good graces with Terri in Conscious Development, he is found unresponsive in his home from an apparent OD. That's what it looked like at first, but then they discover a note that he had left behind on a legal pad, citing his terminal cancer as his reason for making the decision to just go ahead and end it all. However, just like with Robin, an autopsy is performed that reveals that he does not have cancer at all. Don, too, was perfectly healthy. Now, he, of course, being Terri's husband, had her listed as his sole beneficiary. His will, of course, stated that she would inherit everything, although he did have an adult son, and Terri has the audacity to go forward and tell his adult son that the Black Lords had hidden the evidence of his cancer behind an illusion, and that's why they could not detect it. 4 days after Don's passing, a former group member is found beaten inside of her home. Now, it appeared at first to be a random attack, but a closer look reveals that although she had left the group months prior, she had continued to keep in touch with Terri and come visit her frequently, and one of those visits were very recent. They also found it very odd that several pages of her diary had been ripped out, presumably by her attacker. But if it was a random attacker, why would he even know about the diary or care what was in it? Now, this raised a lot of suspicion, but they're unable to definitively link Terri or anybody within her group to this incident. And just a couple of months later, 2 of Terri's long-term followers, David and Glenda Goodman, are found unalived within their home. And they had been there like that for 5 weeks before anyone discovered them. They too had a diary. None of the pages were ripped out, but it outlined a ritualistic double death that they had apparently been planning for months, and detailing all of the things leading up to that day. It had begun with them receiving a message from God that it is time that they are joined in a marriage between their physical self and their spirits. And who did they leave all of their things to? Terri Hoffman. And with this, news begins to spread about the weird pattern of tragedies surrounding Terri. Like, it was just way too many at this point to be a coincidence, right? And finally, a criminal investigation is launched to look into Terri and this group and see what is going on over there. Why and how is this happening? January of 1990, the Dallas DA's office officially decides that Terri is in their crosshairs and they're going to get to the bottom of it. They spend years looking for anything that they could find to tie her to any of these occurrences and cannot find anything. Now, the issue for them was that it did not appear that she had a direct hand in any of the things. They figured that it had to have been like a sort of mind control. But the problem is, can you really take mind control to court and convict somebody? But can that be done? They do attempt to go talk to Terri and question her, but of course she denies any wrongdoing at all. And all of those still standing beside her also deny any allegations of any foul play or any wrongdoing. They say, look, we're good over here. Like literally nothing is going on but a little bit of prayer, a little bit of meditation, a sprinkle of hypnosis here and there, and unfortunately a string of tragic events, but we ain't got nothing to do with that part. And when Terri realized they are not going to let up, she goes and gets her own lawyer, who then flips the narrative and claims that the DA's office is conducting a witch hunt against his very holy client who is undeserving of any of this. The investigation into Terri Hoffman by the DA's office lasts 4 long years, and they are unable to find a shred of evidence linking her directly to any of these unfortunate events. Now, the families of a lot of these victims, they were not convinced that she was innocent. They believed that Terri had a direct hand in the demise of their loved one, and they were not willing to just settle for the DA's answer of, well, we tried, like, we can't really get her. She's slicker than the piss. Can't do it. And so the only other route that they could take to try to get some form of justice is to sue her. With all of these lawsuits, she ended up settling most of them out of court and having to pay. Now, in 1991, after they had completely just wore her out in court and it was time for her to pay up, she files bankruptcy, claiming that all of the negative attention and press from the past 4 years had negatively impacted her business. And she didn't really have it like that. Like, she didn't have all of this money to pay out these settlements to these families. But the problem with that was she only reported one of her little bank accounts when she had several. And she was not really negatively impacted financially by all of the negative press at all. Now, when they stumble upon all these extra accounts with all these extra funds that she just conveniently failed to mention in her bankruptcy filing, she is hit with 10 counts of bankruptcy fraud. And in May of 1994, she is sentenced to 18 months in prison, but she only goes away and does 1 year. In 1995, she is released. And when she is released, child, they have not let up on this girl in the outside world, okay? Unsolved Mysteries was in the middle of doing a show about one of her followers who had mysteriously gone missing. And it oddly happened right after the two of them had a disagreement. Charles Southern had decided to leave Conscious Development. He and Terri had a falling out, a big argument, big disagreement. He had told his family about it. But then they got to a place where they were able to resolve their issues. And not only that, he was invited on their trip to India that was coming up. He tells his family that he's excited to go to India, and they advise him that this doesn't really sound like a good idea. However, he had made up his mind that he had decided he was going to go on this trip, and there was really nothing they could do to change his mind. He was an adult. The first few weeks that go by without anybody hearing from Charles, they don't think anything of it. They believe, okay, he's over in India, he's on this trip, he'll be back. But more and more time is going by without anyone hearing from Charles. And that was a little bit of a red flag. His parents decide to stop by his home just to take a look around and see if they see anything that is odd or out of place, or to see if it had appeared that he had been back to his apartment. When they get to his apartment, it is completely vacant, and they find his passport that has no entry stamps to India. They also find a handwritten note that is apparently his last will and testament, naming Terri as the executor of his estate. Terri claims that she has no knowledge of his whereabouts, and she does not respond to the show's request for an interview when they try to reach out to her to get a statement. Instead, she decides to move on with her life, now a free woman again. In 2005, she remarries, and not only does that change her last name, she also opts to change her middle name as well. Now, one thing I will give Terri, she done always been a hustler, okay? I don't recall Terri ever having a job. She and her husband build a website advertising her many talents, hypnosis, psychic capabilities, the ability to look at somebody and see their aura around them and give them a reading based on their future, their past lives, or their present life, whatever they wanted to know, for a fee, of course. And not only does she and her husband operate this website together, she also uses the site to sell a book that she had written on financial advice, which, from my understanding, she made a pretty decent living on her readings and her materials that she sold all the way up into her death on October 31st of 2015. Now, her website is still up, and from what I gathered, it isn't what it used to be. Like, it's not, of course, advertising any of her gifts because she ain't here no more. It now displays her artwork, which is mostly of like, well, what appears to be clouds that she claims are not actually clouds at all, but actually spiritual beings that have revealed themselves to her.
Is dork-sided.
And I was too scared to go look. I didn't go look at them. I finished this research, or at least I got to this part late at night, like really late at night, and I was like, you know what, not today. I'm not going to look. And even in the daytime, I'm not going to look. But if you care to check it out, the website is heavenandearthphotography.com. You know, it's something about Terri that I found completely unnerving. I don't even know. Maybe it's the fact that she did all of this and got away with it in the end. Like, she really got away with everything. And those clouds sound kind of creepy, honestly. So I think that has something to do with her disrupting the peace of my spirit. But yeah, I'm glad that we done with this one. Like, I am definitely glad to be done researching it because it was a lot, okay? A lot to dig into. And I'm glad to be done filming it because my mouth is dry. It was a lot to deliver, okay? Now, if you're not scared, if you're not like me, open up your phone browser and go look up her website. And let me know in the comments what you see, girl, because I'm not going to look myself. You tell me what's on there. You go look for the both of us if you're not scared. If you're scared, then, girl, we just going to read the comments together and see what everybody else say who ain't scared. But even if you don't check it out and you ain't interested in the site at all, I'm interested in your thoughts on this case. This lady was something else. She literally died on Halloween. Like, excuse me? And she did all of this and paid for none of it. That's crazy. Anywho, let me know your thoughts on this case down below in the comment section. Like the video, please, before you leave. It really helps me out. It really motivates me. And I've been needing a little more motivation lately, I'm going to be honest. As always, I appreciate you so much for spending your time with me. Subscribe if you have not. I didn't say that. Yeah. Share the video with a friend or a foe or somebody you don't know, girl. Anybody. Okay? We're trying to get to 200K and we are almost there. So, yeah. I will see you guys in the next one. Peace. What is up, my YouTube family? Welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time here, then that's why I have to, you know what? Take two. Terri Hoffman and the Black Lords. Is that what they're called? Oh my God. I mean, I have everything off. Like, my phone is not connected to the Wi-Fi, cellular data, Bluetooth, and yet my mom's calls are still coming through. How? That's my girl or whatever, but I'm busy. Bella is laying here licking herself. I try to teach her to be a lady, to be ladylike, but she is none of that. Keeping to herself and intentionally avoiding is not a word. I don't think. It ain't the word I'm trying to use. She would also often she also opted, not ofted. Now once she reaches this orphanage, her faith and religious that's not what I'm trying to say. Odd infatuation with meditation. Not meditation, girl. Hypnosis. It's a lot of foundation, but I'm a lot of girls, so whatever. Don't start. Did you want to say hi? Hey, big girl. My meaty mommy. Ah, don't get up here licking off my stuff. Y'all, look how huge she is. She's a big girl now. Say, I'm a woman now. I'm a lady. Say, I'm a lady. She's so big. Bella, please. She's so big and full of loves. Turn around so they can see you. Say hi. Bella wants a moment, literally every video. What are you sniffing for? Why am I sniffing your paws? They smell like... Girl, I love you too, sweet girl, but mommy gotta do this video. I got to. You're such a cutie. Just like mommy. Now her followers were okay. She began selling books and tapes of her lectures, which helps her to gain even more popularity. You can't get up here licking and snorting, girl. You just cannot. Child, bring your baby to work day. Hey, mommy girl. You like that minty lip gloss, mama? I don't understand why you can't go harass Blue. Why does it have to be me? Say, I love you, mama. That's why. You're gonna be up here, you gotta sit down and listen to the story and be quiet. I don't want your input. I don't want your reactions. None of the things, girl. Not even that. Now, don't even look at me. Just sit here and be content. Conversation with Terri about him no longer to be... What? This girl is really in my lap sleeping. Not you snoring, girl. I'm already letting you sit in my lap and I'm rubbing your little back, girl. But the least you can do is not snore. Hey, girl. Can you just lay down and not snore when you fall asleep? Can you do that for me? I know. Why are you sniffing the mic? See, I'm gonna have to put you down onto the floor. Terri and Christian, I called it Christian, that's shade. For months, what is her name? Sherry, Sandy. And everything, the money, all of her personal belongings are all left. Blue! She and Terri are closer than ever. I said that's so ugly. This mirror is telling me I'm that girl. Now the viewfinder and the monitors are like, girl, you're a girl, not that girl. I'm gonna go with the mirror because I believe I'm that girl.